My name is Sarah. I'm 38 years old, and 1 year ago, my husband tried to destroy my life. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was weak. He thought I would never see it coming. But here's what he didn't know. While he was planning my destruction, I was planning his. While he was learning to betray me, I was learning to fight back. While he was whispering lies in German, thinking I couldn't understand, I was understanding every single word. This is the story of how I became fluent in a language I'd never spoken, just to save myself from the man I'd loved for 12 years. This is the story of the day he discovered that his stupid, manageable wife had been 10 steps ahead of him the entire time. This is the story of revenge served cold, in perfect German. And if you've ever felt underestimated, overlooked, dismissed, or taken for granted by someone who was supposed to love you, I think this story will speak to you. So let's begin. Let's go back to the beginning, to a time when I still believed in love, to a time when I still believed in him. I need you to understand something before we go any further. I wasn't always the woman I am now. A year ago, I was someone completely different, someone softer, someone more trusting, someone who believed that if you just loved someone enough, if you just tried hard enough, if you just were good enough, everything would work out. I was naive. No, that's not quite right. I wasn't naive. I was hopeful, optimistic. I believed in partnership, in marriage, in the idea that two people could build a life together, support each other, grow old together. I believed in fairy tales, I guess. And Mark, my husband, my ex-husband now, Mark seemed like a fairy tale come true. Let me take you back. 13 years ago, a summer barbecue at my friend Rachel's house in Ballard, one of those perfect Seattle summer days where the sky is actually blue and the air smells like grilled food and fresh-cut grass. I was 26 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in graphic design, working as a freelancer, barely making enough money to pay rent on my tiny studio apartment in Capitol Hill. I was living on ramen noodles and optimism, taking whatever design gigs I could find, dreaming of someday having my own successful business. I was young, broke, hopeful. And then I met Mark. He was standing by the grill talking to Rachel's husband Tom, holding a beer, laughing at something. He was 29, tall, good-looking in that clean-cut American way, short dark hair, strong jaw, confident smile. He wore nice clothes, the kind that said he had money, or at least wanted you to think he did. Rachel introduced us. Sarah, this is Mark Bradley. He's Tom's college friend. Mark, this is Sarah Chen. She's a graphic designer. Mark shook my hand. His grip was firm, confident. Graphic designer? That's interesting. Are you freelance or working for a company? Freelance, I said. Just starting out, really. It's challenging. I bet, he smiled. I'm in real estate, investment properties. Just starting out too, actually. Also challenging. We talked for 2 hours that day, standing in Rachel's backyard while the sun set over Puget Sound, while other people mingled and ate and drank. We just talked. He told me about his plans, how he wanted to build a real estate empire, how he'd saved up enough money to buy his first investment property, a small house in Renton that he was fixing up to sell, how he had this vision of being financially independent by 40, of never having to worry about money again. The secret, he said, leaning in like he was sharing something important, is to not get comfortable. Most people, they get one property, they get comfortable, they stop pushing. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep growing, keep expanding. In 10 years, I want to own at least 20 properties. I was impressed. Here was a man with a plan, a vision, ambition. Here was someone who seemed to have life figured out. When he asked for my number at the end of the night, I gave it to him without hesitation. Our first date was at a nice Italian restaurant in downtown Seattle. Mark picked me up in his car, a slightly used BMW that he'd bought at auction, he told me proudly. He held doors open for me. He asked me questions about my work, my dreams, my life. He seemed genuinely interested. You know what I love about design, he said over pasta. It's creative, but it's also strategic. You have to understand what the client wants, what will work, what will sell. It's not just art for art's sake. It's art with a purpose. Exactly, I said, surprised that he got it. Most people didn't understand that design was as much about business as it was about creativity. "We're similar, you and I," Mark said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "We both understand that life is about more than just existing. It's about building something, creating something, making your mark." I felt seen, understood. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I'd met someone who actually got me. We dated for a year. It was a good year, a happy year. Mark was attentive, romantic, ambitious. He worked long hours on his properties, but when we were together, he was present. He'd cook dinner for me. He'd ask about my projects. He'd celebrate my small victories, landing a new client, finishing a difficult logo, getting paid on time. "You're going to be so successful," he'd tell me. "I can see it. You have the talent and the drive. You're going to do amazing things." I believed him. I believed everything he said. We got married on a Saturday in October, exactly 1 year and 2 months after we met. Small wedding. 50 people at a restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. My mother cried happy tears and kept hugging Mark, telling him how lucky he was to have found such a wonderful girl. Mark's father, a stern man who rarely smiled, gave a speech about how Mark had finally found someone who could keep up with him. I didn't understand what he meant by that at the time. Keep up with him sounded like a compliment, like I was Mark's equal, his partner, someone who could match his ambition and drive. Now I understand what he really meant. He meant someone who wouldn't question, someone who would follow, someone who would be supportive and understanding and patient while Mark did whatever he wanted, someone who would be easy to control. But at the wedding, standing at the altar in my simple white dress, holding Mark's hands while we said our vows, I didn't think about any of that. I just thought about how lucky I was, how I'd found a partner, how we were going to build a life together. "I promise to love you," I said, tears in my eyes, "in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." Mark said the same words back to me, and I believed him. I believed every single word. The first few years of our marriage were good. Not perfect, but good. We moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Fremont. I continued my freelance design work from home, setting up a small office in our spare bedroom. Mark continued building his real estate business, slowly acquiring properties, fixing them up, selling them at profit. Money was tight sometimes. There were months when Mark's deals didn't close, and my client work was slow, and we'd sit at our kitchen table doing mental math, figuring out how to make rent and still eat something other than ramen. But we were a team. We were partners. We were in it together. Mark's father died 3 years into our marriage. Heart attack. Sudden. Shocking. Mark took it hard. He didn't cry at the funeral, but for weeks afterward, he was distant, quiet, lost in his own thoughts. I tried to be there for him. I cooked his favorite meals. I gave him space when he needed it. I held him at night when he finally broke down and sobbed into my shoulder, saying over and over, "He never told me he was proud of me. Not once." "He was proud of you," I whispered. "I know he was." "How do you know?" Mark asked, his voice raw. "Because I'm proud of you, and if I can see how amazing you are, he must have seen it too." Mark held me tighter. "I love you, Sarah. I don't tell you that enough, but I do. I love you so much." "I love you too." And I meant it. With everything in me, I meant it. My mother got cancer 4 years into our marriage. Breast cancer, stage 2, caught early but still terrifying. I spent weeks driving back and forth between Seattle and Spokane, where my parents lived, sitting in hospital waiting rooms, holding my mother's hand through chemotherapy, trying not to fall apart. Mark was supportive during that time. He'd call every night to check on me. He'd tell me to stay as long as I needed, that he'd handle everything at home. That family came first. "Your mom is going to beat this," he'd say with confidence I desperately needed to hear. "She's tough, like you." My mother did beat it. She's been cancer-free for 8 years now. But during those awful months when I didn't know if she'd survive, Mark was there. Steady, supportive. Exactly what I needed. How could I not love him after that? How could I not trust him completely? But somewhere along the way, and I've spent countless hours trying to pinpoint exactly when, something changed, not all at once. It wasn't like there was a specific day where Mark woke up and decided to become a different person. It was gradual, subtle, The kind of change that happens so slowly you don't notice it until you look back and realize the person you're living with isn't the person you married. It started with small things. He stopped asking about my work. Used to be he'd come home and want to hear about my projects, my clients, my creative struggles and victories. He'd look at my designs and offer feedback, tell me what he liked, ask questions. But over time, his interest faded. "That's nice, babe," he'd say without really looking. Or, "Sounds good," while scrolling through his phone. Or my least favorite, "That's cute," like my work was a hobby, a fun little pastime, not a real career. My income became extra money instead of our money. My projects became Sarah's thing instead of something we celebrated together. I told myself it was because his business was growing, because he was stressed, because he was focused on his own work. That's normal, right? That's just life. You can't expect your spouse to be interested in everything all the time. So I stopped talking about my work as much. He stopped touching me. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just gradually. Fewer kisses, hello and goodbye. Less hand-holding when we walked together. Sitting on opposite ends of the couch instead of cuddled together. Going to bed at different times so we weren't lying there talking in the dark like we used to. Our sex life, which had never been earth-shattering but had been regular and affectionate, became infrequent. Once a week became twice a month, became once a month, became barely at all. When I tried to initiate, wearing nice lingerie, trying to be spontaneous, suggesting we go to bed early, he'd have excuses. "I'm exhausted, babe. Work was brutal today. I have an early meeting tomorrow. I need to get some sleep. My back is killing me. I just need to rest." Always something. Always a reason that seemed legitimate enough that I couldn't argue without seeming demanding or unreasonable. So I stopped initiating. I told myself it was normal. All marriages go through dry spells. We were busy, stressed, getting older. This was just what happened when you'd been together for a while. It didn't mean anything was wrong, right? He stopped looking at me. That sounds strange, but it's true. He stopped really seeing me. I could walk through our apartment naked and I don't think he would have noticed. I could get a dramatic new haircut, which I did once, cutting off 10 inches, and he didn't comment on it until 3 days later when his mother mentioned it on the phone and he said, "Oh, right, yeah, looks nice." I could cry at the dinner table, which I also did once, overwhelmed by a difficult client and feeling completely alone. And he'd pat my hand absently and say, "You're fine, you're just tired," without ever asking what was actually wrong. I became invisible in my own marriage, a ghost moving through our apartment, cooking meals that barely got eaten, doing laundry for a man who barely acknowledged my existence, working on design projects in a small office while my husband locked himself in what used to be our shared space. About 9 years into our marriage, 3 years ago, Mark announced he needed the spare bedroom as his dedicated office. "The business is growing," he explained. "I need a professional space for client calls, for paperwork, for meetings sometimes. You can work from the living room, right? Your laptop is portable." "But I've been using that room as my office for years," I said, confused. "I know, and that was fine when you were just doing small freelance stuff. But I'm running a real business now, Sarah. I need a professional setup." Just doing small freelance stuff. That stung. But I pushed down the hurt and focused on being understanding, supportive, a good wife. "Okay," I said. "If you need it, you need it." "Thanks, babe. I knew you'd understand." He moved all my things out that weekend, set up a big desk, a new computer, a filing cabinet, a bookshelf. He installed a lock on the door. "For privacy during business calls," he explained when I looked at the lock questioningly. "Some of my conversations involve sensitive financial information. It's just professional, nothing personal." "Of course," I said. "That makes sense." It did make sense. So why did it feel wrong? Around this same time, 3 years ago, maybe a little less, Mark started coming home later and later. He'd always worked long hours. Real estate isn't a 9-to-5 job. I understood that. But this was different. 7 o'clock became 8 o'clock. 8 became 9. Some nights he wouldn't get home until 10 or 11, claiming meetings with clients, with contractors, with lawyers, with building inspectors. "German bureaucracy is insane," he started saying about 2 years ago. That's when the Mueller deal started, though I didn't know that at the time. You wouldn't believe the paperwork involved in international property deals. I'd keep his dinner warm. Sometimes I'd wait up for him, sitting on the couch pretending to watch TV, but really just listening for his key in the lock. Other times I'd give up and go to bed, waking up briefly when he finally came home, smelling of cologne and night air. "Sorry I'm so late," he'd whisper, kissing my forehead. A perfunctory kiss, the kind you give out of obligation, not affection. "It's okay," I'd mumble, half asleep. "I understand." I always understood. That was my role, wasn't it? To understand, to be patient, to be supportive, to be a good wife. My friends started to notice something was wrong. Jessica, my best friend since college, the one person who knew me better than anyone except Mark, maybe even better than Mark, cornered me one day at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. We'd met for our usual monthly coffee date. I'd shown up on time. I'd ordered my regular latte. I'd smiled and asked about her job, her boyfriend, her life. But apparently, my smile didn't reach my eyes. "Okay, stop," Jessica said about 15 minutes into our conversation. She set down her coffee cup with a decisive click. "Stop pretending." "Pretending what?" I asked, caught off guard. "That you're okay, that everything is fine. Sarah, you look exhausted. You've lost weight. You have dark circles under your eyes that makeup isn't quite covering. And you're not really here, you know? You're answering my questions, but you're not present." I opened my mouth to protest, to say I was fine, that I was just busy with work, that I was tired, but nothing was wrong. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, to my horror, tears started sliding down my face. Jessica reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "What's going on? Talk to me." "I don't know," I said honestly. Jessica, I don't know what's wrong. Everything should be fine. Mark's business is doing well. My work is steady. We're financially stable. We have a nice apartment. We're healthy. On paper, everything is great. But I feel like I'm disappearing." The words came out in a rush, like I'd been holding them in for so long they'd been building pressure, waiting to explode. I feel like I'm just fading away, like I'm not a person anymore, just a function. I cook, I clean, I work, I exist. But I'm not alive. I'm not happy. I don't remember the last time Mark and I had a real conversation. I don't remember the last time he looked at me, really looked at me. I don't remember the last time I felt like I mattered. Jessica's expression was a mix of concern and something else. Anger, maybe? "Have you talked to Mark about this?" "How can I? What would I even say?" "Hey, honey, I feel invisible even though you're not actually doing anything specific that's wrong." He'd think I was crazy, or needy, or ungrateful. Sarah? And maybe I am being ungrateful. Maybe this is just what marriage is after 12 years. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe... "Stop," Jessica interrupted firmly. "Stop making excuses for him. Stop minimizing your own feelings. If you're unhappy, you're unhappy. That's not crazy or needy or ungrateful. That's just real." I wiped my eyes with a napkin. I don't know what to do. "Have you considered, I don't know, couples therapy? Or at least talking to him about how you feel?" "I've tried talking to him. He just says I'm overthinking things, that I'm stressed from work, that everything is fine." "But everything isn't fine." "No," I admitted quietly. "It's not." Jessica was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee even though she didn't need to. Finally, she looked up and said something that, in retrospect, was more prophetic than either of us knew. "Sarah, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear me, okay?" I nodded. "You deserve better than fine. You deserve better than just existing. You deserve to be seen, to be valued, to be loved in a way that makes you feel alive. And if Mark can't give you that..." She paused. "Maybe you need to ask yourself some hard questions about whether this marriage is worth saving. Jessica, I know you love him. I know you've built a life together. I know divorce sounds extreme and scary and like failure. But Sarah, what's the alternative? Another 10 years of fading away? Another 20? Is that what you want?" I didn't answer, because I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I did, but I wasn't ready to face it yet. After that coffee date, I went home in a daze. I sat in our apartment, our small, modest, perfectly fine apartment that felt more like a prison than a home, and I looked around at the life I'd built, or rather, the life that had built itself around me while I wasn't paying attention. Mark's things were everywhere. His shoes by the door, his coat on the hook, his mail on the counter, his coffee mug in the sink from this morning's rushed breakfast. Where were my things? My design materials were crammed into a corner of the living room. My books were on a single shelf. My clothes were in half of the closet. I'd made myself smaller and smaller to make room for Mark's expanding presence. When had that happened? When had I started taking up less space in my own home, in my own life? That night, I did something I'd never done before. Mark was out late again, meeting with a potential seller, he'd texted, and I was alone in the apartment. It was after 10. I'd already eaten dinner alone, already cleaned up the kitchen, already spent an hour working on a logo design that I couldn't seem to get right because I couldn't focus. I found myself standing outside Mark's locked office door. I shouldn't go in. It was his private space. He'd made that clear. But something, that same instinct that had been whispering warnings for months, maybe years, pushed me forward. I tried the handle. Locked, as expected. But I knew where he kept the spare key. On top of the doorframe, tucked away where he thought I wouldn't think to look. My hand reached up before I could talk myself out of it. The key was there. I unlocked the door. I went inside. If you're still here, thank you. I know this story is long, but every detail leads to what happens next. And trust me, you'll want to hear it. If you're invested, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you think so far. Are you angry at Mark? Should I have left sooner? Was I right to check his office? Now, let me tell you what I found behind that locked door. Mark's office was a mess. That was the first thing I noticed. Mark, who used to be obsessively organized, who used to line up his pens in perfectly straight lines and alphabetize his files, had let everything fall into chaos. Papers were scattered across his desk, overlapping each other in no particular order. Coffee mugs sat on every available surface, some with liquid still in them, some with dried residue forming rings on his important documents. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the windowsill, growing something green and fuzzy. The filing cabinet drawers were open, folders pulled out and not returned. His trash can was overflowing, crumpled papers spilling onto the floor around it. This was Mark's professional space? This was the office that was too important for me to even enter? I stood in the doorway for a long moment, just staring, trying to reconcile the man I knew, the man who used to organize our spice rack alphabetically, with the person who could work in this disaster zone. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a long time, and I'd just been too willing to believe his explanations, too trusting to question, too conditioned to be understanding. But standing in that doorway, looking at the physical evidence of his unraveling, I felt something shift inside me. A crack in the foundation of my trust. Small, but there. I stepped inside. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Evidence of what? I didn't even know. I just knew I needed to understand what was happening, why my marriage felt like it was dying, why my husband had become a stranger. I started with the desk. Bank statements, property listings, contractor estimates. Nothing unusual, nothing that explained the late nights or the locked door or the distance between us. Then I moved to the bookshelf, real estate textbooks, investment guides, books about negotiation, about property law, about building wealth, all normal, all expected for someone in Mark's business. And then I saw it, wedged between real estate investment for beginners and property flipping strategies. There was a German language textbook, Deutsch heute, Introductory German. I pulled it out slowly, carefully, like it might bite me. The book was worn, clearly well used. Sticky notes protruded from dozens of pages, yellow, pink, blue, creating a rainbow of bookmarks. The spine was cracked from being opened and reopened so many times. I flipped it open to a random page. Mark's handwriting covered the margins, vocabulary lists, grammar notes, practice sentences, translations. Der Mann geht zum Haus. The man goes to the house. Die Frau kauft ein Auto. The woman buys a car. Ich verstehe nicht. I don't understand. He'd been studying, seriously studying, for months probably, maybe longer, and he'd never mentioned it to me. Not once. Not, hey honey, I'm learning German. Not, I think I'll take some language classes. Not even, I'm trying to pick up some basic phrases for work. Nothing. Why? I kept flipping through the pages, looking for, I don't know what, a clue. an explanation, something that would make this make sense. And then I found it. On the last page with his notes, written in blue ink in the bottom margin, underlined 3 times. Sie versteht nicht. She doesn't understand. I stood there, holding that textbook, staring at those 3 words. Sie versteht nicht. Who was she? Was he talking about me? Was I the she who didn't understand? Didn't understand what? My hands started to shake. Not violently, just a small tremor that made the pages of the book flutter slightly. This meant something. I didn't know what yet, but these 3 words, written and underlined in my husband's handwriting, hidden in a language textbook I wasn't supposed to find, in an office I wasn't supposed to enter. This meant something bad. I put the book back exactly where I'd found it, slid it into the gap between the other books, making sure the spine was flush with the others, making sure it looked undisturbed. Then I backed out of the office, turned off the light, closed the door, locked it, replaced the key on top of the doorframe. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water with shaking hands. I sat at our small dining table in the dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside our window, and I tried to think. Sie versteht nicht. She doesn't understand. What didn't I understand? Why was Mark learning German in secret? And why did I have this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach that whatever I didn't understand was something that was going to hurt me? I must have sat there for an hour, maybe 2. Time felt strange, elastic, like it was stretching and compressing simultaneously. When I heard Mark's key in the lock, I jumped up guiltily, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Well, I'd gone into his office without permission, but he'd been keeping secrets. So didn't that make us even? No, I couldn't think like that. I couldn't justify my actions by his unknown actions. I had to be rational, calm. "Hey, babe," Mark called out, kicking off his shoes. "You still up?" "Yeah," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Couldn't sleep." He came into the kitchen, loosening his tie. He looked tired. And guilty? No, I was imagining things, projecting. "How was your meeting?" I asked. "Long, complicated. This German seller he's particular, very particular about details, but I think we're close to finalizing things." German seller. There it was. That's why he was learning German, for this business deal. That made sense. That was logical. Professional, even. So why did I still feel uneasy? "That's great," I managed to say. "What's the property?" "Commercial building downtown. Could be a really good flip if I can get it at the right price." He opened the refrigerator, grabbed a beer. "His name is Mueller. Herr Mueller. Old guy, wants to retire back to Munich, sell everything here and go home." "And he doesn't speak English well?" "Barely at all. His lawyer handles most of the communication, but I've been picking up some German to try to build rapport, show respect for his culture, you know?" That made perfect sense. Complete sense. So why was my heart still racing? "That's smart," I said, thoughtful. "Yeah, well, it's a big deal. Could be worth maybe 250,000 in profit once I flip it. That kind of money, Sarah, that could really change things for us." Change things for us? There was something about the way he said that phrase, something in his tone, his inflection, or maybe I was just being paranoid. "That would be amazing," I said. "It will be." He took a long drink of his beer. "This deal is going to change everything." After Mark went to bed that night, after he kissed me goodnight with that same perfunctory peck that meant nothing, after he rolled over and fell asleep within minutes, after his breathing became slow and regular, I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Sie versteht nicht. She doesn't understand. This could really change things for us. This deal is going to change everything. Why did those phrases feel like warnings instead of promises? Why couldn't I shake this feeling that something terrible was coming? I turned onto my side, watching Mark sleep. His face in repose looked younger, softer, like the man I'd married all those years ago. The man who'd held my hand at that first barbecue. The man who'd told me I was going to do amazing things. The man who'd cried in my arms after his father died. Was that man still in there somewhere? Or had he been replaced by this stranger who locked doors and kept secrets and wrote mysterious phrases in German textbooks? I didn't know. But lying there in the dark, listening to my husband breathe, I felt something crystallize inside me. A decision I didn't even know I was making. Whatever Mark was hiding, whatever he wasn't telling me, whatever was going to change everything. I needed to know what it was. I needed to be prepared. I needed to protect myself. Even if I was wrong, even if I was being paranoid, even if there was a perfectly innocent explanation for everything, I needed to know. And there was only one way to find out what my husband was saying in German, what he was planning, what secrets he was keeping. I needed to learn German myself, in secret, without him knowing. If he could keep secrets, so could I. If he could prepare for something without telling me, I could prepare too. If he was learning a language to communicate with someone I didn't know about, I would learn that language to understand what he was really saying. Sie versteht nicht, he'd written. She doesn't understand. Fine. But she would. That night, that specific night, lying in the dark next to my sleeping husband, something inside me changed. The old Sarah, the trusting Sarah, the understanding Sarah, the patient Sarah who always made excuses and gave the benefit of the doubt, started to die. And someone new started to be born, someone harder, sharper, more strategic, someone who refused to be a victim, someone who would fight. I didn't know it yet, lying there in the dark, but that was the night everything changed. That was the night I stopped being a wife and became a warrior. The next morning, I woke up before Mark. That wasn't unusual. I was always an early riser, especially lately when sleep felt more like restless dozing than actual rest. But that morning was different. That morning, I woke up with purpose, a mission. I lay there for a few minutes listening to Mark's breathing, watching the early morning light creep through our bedroom curtains. Gray light, Seattle light, the kind that makes everything look soft and uncertain. But I felt certain. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt absolutely certain about what I needed to do. I slipped out of bed quietly, grabbed my phone, and went to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the closed toilet lid, and I started researching. How to learn German fast, best German language apps, online German tutors. How long does it take to become fluent in German? The answers varied. Some websites said you could learn conversational German in 3 months. Others said fluency took 2 years minimum. Most agreed that with intensive study, multiple hours per day, you could achieve intermediate proficiency in 6 to 8 months. 6 to 8 months. Could I hide something like that for 6 to 8 months? Could I study a language in secret while living with someone who must never, ever know what I was doing? It seemed impossible. But lying in bed last night, I'd made a decision. And I don't make decisions lightly. When I commit to something, I follow through. Even if it's hard, especially if it's hard. I downloaded 5 language apps right there in the bathroom. Duolingo, Babel, Rosetta Stone, Memories, and one called Anki that was supposed to be amazing for vocabulary retention. I signed up for a free trial of an online German course called GermanPod 101. I found a website that connected you with native German tutors for one-on-one video lessons. And then I sat there on the toilet lid, my phone glowing in the dim bathroom, and I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was. Power. Not over Mark. Not over anyone else. Power over myself. Over my own fate. Over my own future. I was taking action. I was doing something instead of just accepting, understanding, being patient. I was fighting back. Even if Mark never did anything wrong, even if I was completely paranoid and there was an innocent explanation for everything, I was still fighting back against the feeling of invisibility, of powerlessness, of slowly disappearing in my own life. And that felt good. That felt right. The first day of learning German was humbling. After Mark left for work, I opened Duolingo and started the beginner lessons. Der Mann, die Frau, das Kind, the man, the woman, the child. Why 3 different articles? In English, it's just the. Simple, logical. But German had 3, der, die, das. And apparently you just had to memorize which noun took which article because there was no logic to it. Der Tisch, the table, masculine, die Lampe, the lamp, feminine, das Buch, the book, neuter. Why is a table masculine? Why is a lamp feminine? Why is a book neuter? Who decided this? And more importantly, how was I supposed to remember hundreds of nouns and their seemingly random genders? I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but I didn't. I took a deep breath. I made myself a coffee. I sat down at the kitchen table and I kept going. Ich bin, I am. Du bist, you are. Ist, he is. Sie ist, she is. Es ist, it is. Wir sind, we are. Ihr seid, you all are. Sie sind, they are. 8 different conjugations of the verb to be in present tense alone. In English, we have 3, am, are, is. German had 8. And that was just one verb in one tense. How many tenses did German have? How many irregular verbs? How many grammatical rules and exceptions and special cases? I felt overwhelmed, defeated before I'd even really begun. But then I thought about Mark, about his German textbook filled with sticky notes and highlighted passages, about the phrase he'd written, Sie versteht nicht, about whatever he was planning that was going to change everything. And I opened the next lesson. I developed a routine quickly. Had to. If I was going to learn a language in secret, I needed to be systematic, disciplined, careful. The rules I set for myself were non-negotiable. Rule 1. Only study when Mark is out of the apartment or after he's fallen asleep. Rule 2. Always use headphones, volume low enough that I can hear if he comes home unexpectedly. Rule 3. Keep laptop screen brightness at minimum, especially at night. Rule 4. Clear all browser history immediately after every study session. Delete all cookies. Leave no trace. Rule 5. Never, ever get caught. That last rule was the most important. If Mark discovered I was learning German, he'd know I suspected something. He'd know I was preparing for something. He'd become more careful, more secretive. Or worse, he'd accelerate whatever plans he had, act before I was ready to defend myself. So Rule 5 was absolute. Never get caught. My daily schedule became a carefully orchestrated dance of deception. Mark usually left for work around 7:30 in the morning. I'd wake up with him, make coffee, kiss him goodbye, wave as he drove away, and then I'd immediately go to my laptop. 7:30 to noon, German study. 5 hours every single day. I'd work through Duolingo lessons, practice with Babbel, listen to German Pod 101 podcasts, make flashcards in Anki, copy vocabulary lists into a notebook that I kept hidden in a box of tampons under the bathroom sink, the one place I knew Mark would never, ever look. At noon, I'd eat a quick lunch. Then I'd switch to my actual work, the graphic design projects that actually paid our bills. I'd work until 5 or 6, trying to make up for the lost morning hours, trying to keep my clients happy and my income steady. After dinner, which I still cooked every night because that's what good wives do, apparently, Mark would retreat to his locked office for work. Sometimes he'd be on phone calls I could hear through the door, speaking in low tones. Sometimes I'd hear nothing at all, just silence that somehow felt sinister. And I'd clean the kitchen, watch TV, pretend to read a book, until Mark went to bed. Usually around 10 or 11 o'clock, he'd emerge from his office, yawn, say he was exhausted, and go straight to the bedroom. I'd wait. I'd sit on the couch, listening to him brush his teeth, listening to him change into pajamas, listening to him get into bed. I'd give it 20 minutes, 30 to be safe. And then, when I was absolutely certain he was asleep, I'd go to the bathroom with my phone and headphones. I'd sit on the toilet lid or in the empty bathtub, phone brightness at minimum, volume so low I could barely hear it myself, and I'd practice pronunciation. Guten Morgen. Good morning. Wie geht es Ihnen? How are you? Ich verstehe nicht. I don't understand. Entschuldigung. Excuse me. Danke schön. Thank you very much. The words felt wrong in my mouth. Foreign. Like my tongue wasn't designed to make these sounds. German has sounds that English doesn't have. The guttural cheech that sounds like you're clearing your throat. The oo and u vowels that require your lips to do things they've never done before. I felt ridiculous, sitting in my bathtub at midnight, whispering German phrases to myself while my husband slept 20 feet away. But I kept doing it, every single night. 2 weeks into my secret studies, I had my first close call. It was a Tuesday night. Mark had gone to bed around 10:30. I'd waited my usual 30 minutes, then snuck to the bathroom with my phone to practice pronunciation. I was working on the difference between ich, I, and ache, oh, trying to get that throaty E sound right. When I heard footsteps in the hallway, my heart stopped. I ripped out my headphones, stuffed them and my phone behind the toilet, flushed for cover noise, and stood up just as Mark knocked on the bathroom door. Sarah? You okay in there? Yeah, fine. My voice came out too high, too loud. I cleared my throat, tried again. Just stomach's a little upset. Must have been something I ate. Oh, sorry. Do you need anything? Tums? No, I'm fine. Go back to bed. Sorry I woke you. Okay. Feel better. I heard his footsteps retreat back to the bedroom. I stood there, hand pressed against my chest, feeling my heart hammer like it was trying to escape. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. That was too close. Way too close. If he'd walked in, if I'd forgotten to lock the door, if he'd seen my phone with German lessons on the screen. But he hadn't. I'd gotten lucky. This time. I retrieved my phone from behind the toilet, turned off all the German apps, cleared the history, and went to bed. I didn't study for the rest of that night. Too risky. Too scared. But the next day, after Mark left for work, I was back at it. Because fear wasn't going to stop me. Nothing was going to stop me. By the end of the first month, I could recognize common words and phrases. I could conjugate basic verbs in present tense. I could count to 100. I could introduce myself, ask simple questions, understand simple answers. Ich heiße Sarah. Ich bin 38 Jahre alt. Ich wohne in Seattle. My name is Sarah. I am 38 years old. I live in Seattle. It wasn't much, but it was progress. More importantly, I was developing an ear for the language. When I'd hear Mark on the phone in his office, occasionally speaking what I now recognized as German, I could catch a word here and there. Not enough to understand full sentences, but enough to know he was definitely speaking German more often than he'd let on. Ja, yes, nein, no, gut, good, verstehen, understand. Little pieces of a puzzle I didn't yet have enough pieces to complete, but I was collecting them, one by one, day by day. 6 weeks in, I took a big step. I hired a tutor. Her name was Frau Weber. She was a German woman in her 50s who lived in Berlin and taught German online to students all over the world. I found her through an agency that specialized in connecting students with native-speaking tutors. I scheduled my first lesson for a Tuesday morning at 11 a.m., a time when Mark was guaranteed to be at his office, when I could lock our apartment door, when I could speak out loud without fear. That first video call was terrifying. Frau Weber appeared on my laptop screen, a stern-looking woman with short gray hair and sharp blue eyes. She looked like someone who wouldn't tolerate nonsense, someone who would see right through any pretense. Guten Tag, she said. Du bist Sarah, ja? I understood that. Good day. You are Sarah, yes? But speaking back, that was different from understanding. That required my brain to form German words, my mouth to actually produce them, my confidence to push them out into the world. Ja, I managed. Ich bin Sarah. Gut. Warum lernst du Deutsch? Why are you learning German? I'd prepared an answer to this question, knowing it would come up. Ich möchte nach Deutschland reisen. Für Arbeit. I want to travel to Germany. For work. It was halting, probably grammatically wrong, but Frau Weber nodded. Okay, das ist gut. Wir können auf Englisch sprechen, wenn du möchtest. We can speak in English if you want. Yes, please, I said, relief flooding through me. My German is not good yet. It will be, Frau Weber said with a small smile. If you are dedicated. Learning a language takes time and effort. Are you dedicated, Sarah? Yes, I said firmly. Very dedicated. Good. Then we will begin. Frau Weber was exactly what I needed. Demanding, thorough, patient in the right moments, and firm in others. We met twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 a.m. Each session was 1 hour. She'd assign homework, vocabulary to memorize, grammar exercises to complete, short paragraphs to write. I did every single assignment. More than that, I went beyond what she asked. If she assigned 20 vocabulary words, I'd learn 40. If she asked for 1 paragraph, I'd write 3. You are a very motivated student, she told me during our 4th session. Most students, they do the minimum, but you are hungry to learn. Why? I paused, trying to think of how to explain without revealing the truth. I have a goal, a deadline, sort of. I need to reach a certain level by September. September? She calculated quickly. That is, 7 months from now? Yes. What level do you need to reach? Conversational fluency. I I need to understand complex discussions, legal language, business language. She raised her eyebrows. That is ambitious. Very ambitious. Most students take at least a year, often longer. I don't have longer, I said simply. She studied me through the video screen for a long moment. There is a story here, I think, a reason you are not telling me. I didn't answer. She nodded slowly. Okay, you don't have to tell me. But Sarah, if you are serious, if you truly need this level by September, you must study many hours every day, 4 hours minimum. 5 would be better. I'm already doing 5, I said. Her expression shifted to something like respect. Then we will make this happen, but you must be prepared. It will be very difficult. There will be days you want to quit, days when the grammar makes no sense and the vocabulary won't stick and you feel like you're making no progress. I won't quit, I said. You sound very certain. I am. Because I was. Whatever Mark was planning, whatever was coming in September, I would be ready. I would understand every word. I would protect myself. I would not be a victim. How are you feeling about this story so far? Are you on Sarah's side? Angry at Mark? Tell me in the comments. And if you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe. Things are only getting more intense. Now let me tell you about the hardest 3 months of my life. The months I almost got caught. The months I nearly gave up. The months when everything I thought I knew began to fall apart. Living a double life is exhausting. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean it literally exhausts you, drains you, hollows you out until you feel like a shell of a person going through motions without substance. Every single day was an act, a performance, a carefully maintained illusion. With Mark, I had to be normal Sarah, trusting Sarah. The wife who smiled and nodded and asked about his day and never questioned anything. The wife who didn't notice when he came home with cologne that wasn't his usual brand. The wife who didn't wonder why he showered as soon as he got home on nights he'd been out late. The wife who was too naive, too stupid, too convenient to ever suspect anything. Alone, I was Secret Sarah, Warrior Sarah. The woman who studied German 5 to 6 hours every day. The woman who was building a vocabulary of legal and business terms. The woman who was preparing for a confrontation she didn't fully understand yet but knew was coming. The split between these two selves felt like it was tearing me apart. 3 months into my German studies, it was now June. I was making real progress. I could understand German conversations at normal speed, even if I couldn't always respond fluently. I could read German newspapers and understand maybe 70% without looking up words. I could watch German TV shows and follow the plot. Frau Weber was impressed. "Your progress is truly remarkable," she said during one of our sessions. "In 3 months, you have achieved what takes most students 8 to 10 months. Your dedication shows." "Thank you," I said in German. We'd started conducting our lessons entirely in German a few weeks earlier. "But I wonder," she continued, studying me through the screen, "what drives this dedication? This urgency? It is more than just travel for work, I think." I hesitated. Could I tell her? Could I trust her with even a piece of the truth? "My husband," I said finally, slowly, choosing my words carefully in German. "He is learning German. For business. I want to—" I paused, looking for the right word. "I want to understand his world better." It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. Frau Weber's expression softened. "Ah, you are learning your husband's language. That is, romantic, thoughtful." "Maybe," I said, but I thought, no, it's survival. Around the same time, mid-June, I made a discovery that changed everything. Mark had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. This wasn't unusual. He'd been getting more careless lately, more confident that I was too trusting to ever violate his privacy. He was right, in a way. The old Sarah wouldn't have touched his phone. The old Sarah would have felt guilty even thinking about it. But I wasn't the old Sarah anymore. I picked up the phone. I knew his passcode. We'd always shared our phone passwords back when we still believed in transparency, before he started keeping secrets. The passcode still worked. He hadn't changed it. Stupid, careless, arrogant. I opened his text messages. Most of them were boring. Work contacts, his business partner Dave, a group chat with college friends about some upcoming golf thing, And then I saw a name I didn't recognize. Jennifer. My hands started shaking before I even opened the message thread. I opened it. Jennifer. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Mark. Me too. Same place? Jennifer. Yes, I'll be there at 6. Mark. Perfect. Don't be late. Wear that blue dress I like. I scrolled up. The messages went back months. January, December, November. Before he'd even started talking about the German property deal. Before any of this. Photos. Jennifer was beautiful. Blonde, probably late 20s, with one of those effortless smiles that some women just have. In the photos, she was laughing, looking at the camera. At Mark, presumably. Looking at him with affection. With intimacy. More messages. Jennifer. I hate sneaking around like this. Mark. I know, baby. Not much longer. Once the property deal closes, everything changes. Jennifer. You keep saying that. When, Mark? Mark. Soon, I promise. Just be patient. It'll all be worth it. Jennifer. What about her, your wife? Mark. What about her? Jennifer. Do you feel guilty at all? Mark. No? Should I? Jennifer. I don't know. She's been your wife for what, 12 years? Mark. 13. And honestly? No, I don't feel guilty. I outgrew her years ago. She was useful in the beginning. Supportive, not too demanding, easy to live with. But I need more now. I need someone with ambition, someone who understands business, someone like you. I had to sit down. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. She was useful, easy to live with. I outgrew her years ago. I read those words over and over, trying to make them mean something other than what they clearly meant. But there was no other interpretation. My husband, the man I'd loved for 13 years, the man I'd supported through his father's death, the man I'd cooked for and cleaned for and made myself smaller for, thought I was useful. Not a person, not a partner, not someone he loved. Useful. And now I wasn't even that anymore. Now I was something he'd outgrown, something he needed to discard so he could move on to Jennifer, the ambitious one, the one who understood business, the one who was better. I kept scrolling through the messages, torturing myself with each new revelation. Mark to Jennifer. I'm meeting with Mueller again next week. If this deal closes like I think it will, we're talking maybe $250,000 profit. Jennifer. That's amazing. And then you'll finally tell her? Mark. Yes. Once the money is secured, I'll file for divorce. She won't see it coming. Jennifer. Won't she get half in the divorce? Mark. Not if I'm smart about it. I've been talking to a lawyer. If I can structure the property deal right, keep it under my business LLC, it won't be considered marital property. She'll get half the apartment, maybe some savings. But the big money? That's mine. Ours. I sat there on my kitchen floor, my husband's phone in my hands, and I felt something inside me die. Not my love for him. That had died months ago, maybe years ago. I just hadn't acknowledged it yet. What died was the last little piece of hope I'd been holding on to. The hope that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. There was no innocent explanation. My husband was having an affair. Had been for at least 7 months. Maybe longer. He was planning to divorce me. He was planning to steal the profits from his property deal, hide them from me, leave me with almost nothing. And he thought I was too stupid, too trusting, too useful to ever figure it out. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that I heard the shower turn off. Long enough that panic shot through me. I was still holding his phone, still sitting on the floor, still not acting normal. I scrambled up, put the phone back exactly where he'd left it on the counter, went to the living room, sat on the couch, picked up a magazine, tried to look casual. When Mark came out of the bedroom, hair damp, wearing fresh clothes, he smiled at me. Hey babe, what are you up to? Nothing much, I said. My voice sounded normal. How was my voice normal when everything inside me was screaming? Just reading. Cool, I'm going to grab some lunch and head to the office. See you tonight? Yeah, what do you want for dinner? Whatever you feel like making, you always make good stuff. He kissed me on the forehead, that patronizing kiss I'd come to hate, and left. I sat there on the couch, magazine in my lap, until I heard his car start, until I heard him drive away, until I was absolutely certain I was alone. And then I went to the bathroom, locked the door, sat in the empty bathtub, and cried. Not quiet, dignified crying, ugly crying. The kind where you can't breathe, where your whole body shakes, where sounds come out of you that you didn't know you could make. I cried for the marriage I'd thought I had. I cried for the man I'd thought I'd married. I cried for the 13 years I'd wasted on someone who thought I was useful. I cried for myself, for the woman who'd been so blind, so trusting, so naive. I cried until I had no tears left, and then I got up, washed my face, looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were red and swollen. My face was blotchy. I looked like I'd been crying for hours. But underneath the crying, underneath the pain, I saw something else. Determination. Rage. Steel. You think I'm stupid? I thought, staring at my reflection. You think I'm too naive to figure out what you're doing. You think I'll just accept whatever you decide to give me in the divorce. You're wrong. So very, very wrong. That night, after my crying session, after I'd pulled myself together, after I'd splashed cold water on my face until the redness faded, I made a new plan. Learning German wasn't enough. Understanding what Mark said in his business meetings wasn't enough. I needed evidence. Concrete, undeniable evidence of his affair, of his plans, of his intention to defraud me. I needed proof that would hold up in court. I needed ammunition. So I started collecting it. Over the next several weeks, through June and into July, I became a spy in my own home. Every time Mark left his phone unattended, even for a minute, I'd check it. I'd screenshot his messages with Jennifer, his messages with his lawyer about structuring the property deal, his messages with Mueller's lawyer, everything. I'd email the screenshots to myself, then delete the email from his sent folder and from my sent folder and from the trash. I'd save them in a hidden folder in my personal email, password protected, labeled recipes, so if Mark ever somehow accessed my email, he wouldn't think to look there. I started taking photos of documents he left lying around in his office, property deeds, financial statements, meeting notes, anything that might be useful. I was careful, so careful. I'd only go into his office when he was gone, when I was absolutely certain he wouldn't come home unexpectedly. I'd photograph documents with my phone, then make sure everything was put back exactly as I'd found it. Exactly. If a paper was at an angle, I'd match that angle. If a folder was slightly open, I'd leave it slightly open to the same degree. I became obsessive about details because one wrong detail, one tiny thing out of place, and Mark might notice, might realize I was onto him, might accelerate his plans before I was ready. I also started keeping a journal, written in German, for practice and for security. If Mark somehow found it, he wouldn't be able to read it. Ironic, really. In that journal, I documented everything. Every time Mark came home late with a weak excuse, every time he showered immediately after getting home, every time he checked his phone and smiled at a message he wouldn't show me, every conversation we had where he mentioned soon, or once the deal closes, or things will change. I documented dates, times, details. I was building a case, a legal case, an ironclad, undeniable case that would show exactly what Mark had done, exactly what he'd planned, exactly how he'd tried to destroy me. And when the time came, when the moment was right, I would use it all. But living like this, collecting evidence, maintaining the facade, studying German for hours every day, pretending everything was fine, it was destroying me. I lost weight. I wasn't trying to, I just forgot to eat sometimes. Or I'd make dinner for Mark and push food around my own plate without actually consuming much of it. I developed insomnia. Even when I was exhausted, my brain wouldn't shut off. I'd lie in bed next to Mark, watching him sleep peacefully. Because of course he slept peacefully. He had nothing to feel guilty about, apparently, and my mind would spin with everything I knew, everything I was learning, everything I was planning. I had constant tension headaches. My jaw hurt from clenching it all day. My shoulders were permanently tight. My hands shook when I held my coffee cup. Jessica noticed. Of course she noticed. She knew me too well. "Sarah," she said when we met for coffee one afternoon in July, "you look like you haven't slept in weeks. What's going on? And don't tell me nothing because I know that's bullshit." I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to tell someone so badly. Carrying all of this alone was crushing me. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I was ready to act. Because if I told Jessica, she'd want me to confront Mark immediately. She'd want me to leave him, file for divorce, get out. But I couldn't do that. Not yet. Not before the property deal closed, not before I had everything I needed to protect myself financially. I'm okay, I lied. Just stressed with work, and Mark has been distant. Marriage stuff, you know? Marriage stuff, Jessica repeated flatly. Sarah, marriage stuff doesn't make you look like a ghost. What's really going on? I can't. My voice broke. I can't talk about it yet. But Jessica, I promise, when I can tell you, I will, okay? Just trust me. Trust that I'm handling it. She looked at me for a long moment. Are you safe? Is he hurting you? Not physically, I said. I'm safe. I promise. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Okay, but Sarah, whatever you're dealing with, whatever is happening, you don't have to deal with it alone. You know that, right? I'm here. Whenever you're ready to talk. I know. Thank you. We hugged goodbye, and I felt terrible for lying to her, but I couldn't tell the truth. Not yet. Soon, but not yet. By August, 8 months into my German studies, I was fluent. Really, truly fluent. I could have full conversations in German without having to think about grammar or search for words. I could read German novels and understand every nuance. I could watch German TV without subtitles. I could think in German. Frau Weber was amazed. In all my years of teaching, she told me during one of our sessions, I have never seen a student progress this quickly. Sarah, you could live and work in Germany right now. Your German is that good. Thank you, Frau Weber. You're an excellent teacher. No, you are an excellent student. I provided guidance, but this achievement is yours. You worked for this. She paused, studying me through the screen. And I think you needed it. Yes? Yes, I said quietly. I needed it. May I ask why? You never told me the real reason. I considered lying again, but I was so tired of lying. My husband, I said slowly in German, is planning to betray me. And when he does, when he thinks I don't understand what's happening, I will be ready. Because I will understand everything, every word he says, every plan he makes, everything. Frau Weber was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. I understand, and I am sorry. But Sarah, you are a warrior. What you have accomplished, the dedication you have shown, this is the work of someone who refuses to be defeated. I hope, when the time comes, you show him exactly how strong you are. I will, I promised. I will. September arrived. 8 months since I'd started learning German. 8 months of living a double life. 8 months of collecting evidence, building my case, preparing for a confrontation I knew was coming. Mark announced the final meeting with Mueller would be on September 15th, 3 days away. This is it, he said over breakfast that morning, actually making eye contact with me for the first time in weeks, maybe months. After all these months of negotiations, we're finally going to sign the preliminary documents. Mueller and his lawyer will fly in from Munich. We're meeting at Frau Schmidt's office. That's his lawyer. And then everything starts to move forward. That's wonderful, I said, smiling, playing my part. You must be so relieved. Yeah, relieved, excited, nervous. This is the biggest deal of my career, Sarah. If I can pull this off. He trailed off, looking at me with something that might have been affection, or guilt, or just performance. You'll pull it off, I said. You always do. Thanks, babe. He reached across the table and took my hand. I had to force myself not to flinch. You know, I know I've been distant lately, preoccupied with this deal, but once it closes, things are going to be different. Better, I promise. Different. Better. Because he'd have his money and his girlfriend and his new life, and I'd be discarded like the useful tool I'd been. But I just smiled. I'm looking forward to it. Actually, Mark said, like the thought had just occurred to him, do you want to come to the meeting? I know it'll be boring, lots of legal talk, most of it in German probably, but if you want to be there, you can. My heart stopped. He was inviting me to the meeting where he'd speak German, where he'd finalize plans to steal from me, where he'd think I was too stupid to understand anything. This was it. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. Really? I said, trying to sound surprised and pleased. You don't mind? Why would I mind? You're my wife. And honestly, it might be nice to have you there. Show Mueller that I'm a family man, you know? Good optics. Good optics. I was a prop, a visual aid to make him look more trustworthy. I'd love to come, I said, if you're sure I won't be in the way. Not at all. Just wear something nice, look professional, and don't worry if you don't understand anything. It's going to be a lot of business jargon in German. Just smile and nod. Just smile and nod. Oh, Mark, if only you knew. If only you had any idea what was about to happen. All right. This is where everything comes together. 8 months of secret lessons. 8 months of planning. 8 months leading to this moment. If you're invested, hit like and subscribe. Because what happens in that conference room is something you don't want to miss. Tell me in the comments, what would you do in Sarah's place? Now let me take you to September 15th, the day my husband learned his stupid, manageable wife spoke fluent German, the day his world collapsed, the day I stopped being a victim and became someone entirely new. September 15th dawned gray and rainy, typical Seattle September weather. I woke up early before Mark and lay in bed for a few minutes just listening to the rain against the windows, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. Today was the day. After 8 months of preparation, today was the day I would finally use everything I'd learned. I felt calm, not nervous, not scared, just calm, clear, ready. I got up quietly, went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror. I'd lost weight over the past 8 months. My face was thinner, more angular. I had dark circles under my eyes that concealer could only partially hide. But my eyes themselves were different, harder, sharper. The eyes of someone who'd been through fire and come out steel. I took a shower, did my makeup carefully, professional but not overdone, curled my hair, wore the navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion, expensive, elegant. The kind of dress that said, I'm not just here as a decoration. I put on the diamond earrings Mark had given me for our 10th anniversary, back when he still pretended to care, back when I still believed he did. When I emerged from the bathroom, Mark was awake, sitting on the bed scrolling through his phone, probably texting Jennifer. He looked up when I walked in. Wow, you look great. Thank you. Seriously, that dress is perfect, very professional. Mueller's going to be impressed. Mueller's not the one I need to impress today, but I just smiled. I want to look good for your big day. Our big day, he corrected, standing up and kissing my cheek. This is for us, babe. For our future. Liar. I know, I said. We drove downtown together in Mark's car. He was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept adjusting the air conditioning, changing the radio station, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. You okay? I asked. Yeah, just big day. Lot riding on this. It'll go great. You've worked so hard for this. Thanks. He glanced at me. Hey, just so you know, the meeting's probably going to be pretty boring for you. Lots of technical stuff, legal language, and like I said, probably a lot of German. Don't feel bad if you zone out or check your phone or whatever. I won't be offended. I'll try to pay attention, I said. It's interesting seeing you work. Yeah, well, just don't worry if you don't understand anything. That's normal. Don't worry if you don't understand anything. Those words echoed in my head, echoed the phrase I'd found in his German textbook 8 months ago. Sie versteht nicht. She doesn't understand. But I did understand. I understood everything. And in about an hour, he was going to find out exactly how much I understood. The lawyer's office was in a glass tower downtown, the kind of building that screamed money and power. We rode the elevator to the 23rd floor in silence. Mark's nervous energy was almost palpable. My calm was absolute. The receptionist directed us to a conference room at the end of a long hallway. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle, Elliott Bay, the Olympic Mountains in the distance obscured by rain clouds. Inside the conference room, 2 people were already seated. Herr Mueller was exactly what I'd expected. A thin man in his 70s with perfectly white hair, sharp blue eyes behind frameless glasses, wearing an expensive suit that looked European in its cut. He stood when we entered, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd aged with dignity. Herr Bradley, he said, his English heavily accented. So good to see you. Herr Mueller, Mark replied, shaking his hand with professional warmth. Thank you so much for making the trip. And this must be your wife? Miller turned to me, taking my hand gently. "Yes, this is Sarah," Mark said. "Sarah, this is Herr Mueller." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Herr Mueller," I said in English, smiling warmly. "The pleasure is mine, Frau Bradley." The second person in the room introduced herself, Frau Schmidt, Miller's lawyer. She was a woman in her mid-40s, professional and stern-looking, with dark hair pulled into a severe bun and glasses that made her look even more no-nonsense. "Shall we begin?" she asked, gesturing to the conference table. We all sat, Miller and Frau Schmidt on one side, Mark and me on the other, a stack of documents between us. And so it began. The first 30 minutes were conducted entirely in English. Frau Schmidt walked through the basic structure of the deal: property description, boundaries, inspection reports, previous surveys. Mark asked intelligent questions. Miller provided thoughtful answers. Everything was professional, cordial, businesslike. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, watching, learning, waiting. At one point, Frau Schmidt glanced at me. "Frau Bradley, do you understand what we are discussing?" I smiled pleasantly. Some of it. Honestly, this is all a bit over my head. Business and legal matters aren't really my thing, but I'm here to support Mark. She nodded, satisfied. Mark gave me an appreciative smile. "Good wife, know your place." And they continued. I resumed my waiting. About 35 minutes in, Frau Schmidt said, "Now we need to discuss the property registration. Herr Bradley, you mentioned you wanted the deed registered to your business LLC rather than joint marital property?" "That's correct," Mark said. "For tax purposes, it's more advantageous to have it under my business entity." "I see." She made a note. "And Frau Bradley, you are comfortable with this arrangement?" Mark answered before I could. "She trusts me to handle the business side of things. That's always been our arrangement." "Still," Frau Schmidt said, looking at me, "this is a significant financial decision. You should perhaps have your own legal counsel review." "It's fine," I said, smiling that pleasant, empty smile I'd perfected. "Mark knows what he's doing. I trust him completely." "Liar." "Very well," Frau Schmidt said, though she looked slightly uncomfortable. And then she turned to Mueller and switched to German. "Here we go." "Herr Mueller," Frau Schmidt said in German, "sind Sie sicher, dass Sie mit dieser Vereinbarung einverstanden sind? Die Immobilie wird ausschließlich auf seinen Firmennamen registriert, nicht auf beide Ehepartner." "Herr Mueller, are you certain you're comfortable with this arrangement? The property will be registered exclusively to his company name, not to both spouses." I kept my eyes on my phone, scrolling through nothing, looking bored, but I was listening to every single word. Müller responded, "In Deutschland wäre das ungewöhnlich. Normalerweise würden beide Ehepartner auf der Urkunde stehen. Ist das in Amerika normal?" "In Germany, that would be unusual. Normally, both spouses would be on the deed. Is this normal in America?" Mark jumped in with his intermediate German. "Ja, es ist normal für Steuerzwecke. Sehr häufig bei Geschäften." "Yes, it's normal for tax purposes. Very common in business." His German wasn't bad, actually. Better than I'd expected, but not as good as mine. Frau Schmidt continued, "Und nach Abschluss des Verkaufs, was sind Ihre Pläne für die Immobilie? And after closing the sale, what are your plans for the property?" This was it. This was where he'd reveal the lie. Mark replied smoothly in German, "Ich plane es zu renovieren und als Mietinvestition zu behalten. I plan to renovate it and keep it as a rental investment." Liar. Müller frowned. "Aber vorher haben Sie gesagt, Sie würden es schnell verkaufen. Sie sagten, der Markt sei heiß und Sie könnten einen guten Gewinn erzielen. But before you said you'd sell it quickly. You said the market was hot and you could make a good profit." Mark's body language shifted, just slightly. A tiny tell that he'd been caught in inconsistency. "Meine Pläne haben sich geändert," Mark said. "Je mehr ich darüber nachdenke, desto mehr sehe ich den Wert einer langfristigen Investition." "My plans have changed. The more I think about it, the more I see the value in long-term investment. Such smooth lies. If I didn't know better, I might have believed him." Mueller still looked skeptical, but before he could respond, Mark said something that made my blood turn to ice. He spoke rapidly, casually, clearly thinking I couldn't understand a word. "Und ehrlich gesagt, Herr Müller, je weniger meine Frau über die Einzelheiten weiß, desto besser. Sie versteht Geschäfte nicht wirklich. Sie ist, wie sage ich das, nicht besonders klug, wenn es Geld geht. Sehr naiv. And honestly, Herr Müller, The less my wife knows about the details, the better. She doesn't really understand business. She's, how do I say, not particularly smart when it comes to money. Very naive. There it was. The words I'd been waiting to hear. The words that confirmed everything. I kept my face carefully neutral, kept scrolling through my phone, gave absolutely no indication that I'd understood. Frau Schmidt looked uncomfortable. Herr Bradley, das ist... Sollte Ihre Frau nicht ihren eigenen Anwalt haben? Wenn dies eine große finanzielle Entscheidung ist... Herr Bradley, that's... Shouldn't your wife have her own lawyer? If this is a major financial decision... Nicht nötig, Mark interrupted. Sie vertraut mir vollkommen. Sie stellt nie Fragen. Sehr praktisch, ehrlich gesagt. Not necessary. She trusts me completely. She never asks questions. Very convenient, honestly. Muller's expression had shifted from skeptical to disapproving. Herr Bradley, ich bin nicht sicher, ob ich Geschäfte mit jemandem machen möchte, der seine Frau so behandelt. Herr Bradley, I'm not sure I want to do business with someone who treats his wife this way. Mark's face flushed slightly. He tried to laugh it off. Herr Müller, Sie verstehen nicht. Herr Müller, you don't understand. Ich verstehe sehr gut, Miller interrupted, his voice cold. Sie planen, diese Immobilie zu verkaufen, nicht sie zu behalten. Sie planen, ihre Frau über die Gewinne zu täuschen, und sie behandeln sie wie eine Idiotin. I understand very well. You plan to sell this property, not keep it. You plan to deceive your wife about the profits, and you treat her like an idiot. This was spiraling. Mark was losing control. I could see the panic starting to set in. Nein, das ist nicht... Mark started. No, that's not... Ich habe auch gehört, Miller continued relentlessly, dass Sie eine Affäre haben, dass Sie planen, sich von Ihrer Frau scheiden zu lassen, sobald dieser Deal abgeschlossen ist. I've also heard that you're having an affair, that you plan to divorce your wife as soon as this deal closes. Wait, how did Miller know about that? Mark went pale. Woher? Wer hat Ihnen das gesagt? Who told you that? Das spielt keine Rolle, Miller said dismissively. Was wichtig ist, ich mache keine Geschäfte mit Betrügern. That doesn't matter. What's important, I don't do business with frauds. And then Muller stood up, clearly preparing to leave. This was happening too fast. This wasn't how I'd planned it. I couldn't let Muller walk away before I'd had my moment, before I'd shown Mark exactly what I was capable of. So I did the thing I'd been planning for 8 months. I set down my phone. I looked up. I smiled. And I spoke, in perfect fluent German. Herr Müller, I said clearly, my voice steady and strong, ich möchte mich bei Ihnen entschuldigen. Mein Mann hat Sie angelogen. Hat mich angelogen. Und dachte, ich wäre zu dumm, es jemals herauszufinden. Herr Müller, I want to apologize to you. My husband lied to you. He lied to me. And he thought I was too stupid to ever figure it out. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. Müller froze halfway out of his chair, his eyes widening in shock. Frau Schmidt's mouth literally dropped open. And Mark's face was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Complete shock, horror. The slow realization of what was happening washing over him like a wave. Sarah, he whispered, you speak German? I ignored him, continuing in German, addressing Müller directly. Mein Mann plant, diese Immobilie sofort nach dem Kauf zu verkaufen. Hat mir das nie gesagt. Plant, den gesamten Gewinn in einem separaten Geschäftskonto zu verstecken. Plant, sich von mir scheiden zu lassen, ohne das Geld mit mir zu teilen. My husband plans to sell this property immediately after purchase. He never told me this. He plans to hide all the profits in a separate business account. He plans to divorce me without sharing the money with me. I pulled out my phone, opened the folder of screenshots I'd been collecting for months. Hier sind Textnachrichten zwischen meinem Mann und seiner Geliebten. Sie heißt Jennifer. Sie haben seit mindestens 7 Monaten eine Affäre. Here are text messages between my husband and his mistress. Her name is Jennifer. They've been having an affair for at least 7 months. I held up my phone, showing the messages clearly. Mark and Jennifer's conversation about me, about how stupid I was, how naive, how convenient. Frau Schmidt leaned forward to look, her professional mask slipping to show clear disgust. Das ist widerlich, she muttered. That's disgusting. I continued, still in German, my voice gaining strength. Außerdem habe ich seit 8 Monaten heimlich Deutsch gelernt. Seit dem Tag, an dem ich herausgefunden habe, dass mein Mann mich betrügt. Seit dem Tag, an dem ich beschlossen habe, dass ich kein Opfer sein würde. Furthermore, I've been secretly learning German for 8 months. Since the day I discovered my husband was betraying me. Since the day I decided I wouldn't be a victim. Mark finally found his voice. Sarah, what the hell is going on? How did you... I switched to English, looking at him directly for the first time in the meeting, really looking at him, letting him see everything in my eyes, every moment of pain, every discovered lie, every night I'd spent studying a language in secret to protect myself from his betrayal. I've been learning German since March, Mark, since the day I found your textbook in your office, since the day I saw Sie versteht nicht written in the margin, since the day I found your text with Jennifer. His face cycled through emotions: shock, anger, fear, desperation, panic. This whole time, you've been... I understood everything, I said calmly. Every word you said in German about how stupid I am, how naive, how convenient, how useful. Every conversation about your plan to steal this property from me. Every lie you told Herr Müller about keeping it as an investment. I turned back to Müller, switching to German again. Herr Müller, ich entschuldige mich zutiefst für die Zeit, die Sie verschwendet haben. Mein Mann ist ein Lügner und ein Betrüger. Sie haben recht, keine Geschäfte mit ihm zu machen. Herr Müller, I apologize deeply for the time you've wasted. My husband is a liar and a fraud. You're right not to do business with him. Müller sat back down slowly, looking at me with something like respect. He spoke in German. Frau Bradley, Sie haben 8 Monate lang Deutsch gelernt, nur Ihren Mann zu entlarven? Frau Bradley, you learned German for 8 months just to expose your husband? Ja, I said simply. Mich selbst zu schützen. Yes, to protect myself. He shook his head in what looked like admiration. Das ist bemerkenswert. Sie sind eine sehr starke Frau. That's remarkable. You are a very strong woman. Danke, I said. Thank you. Frau Schmidt was packing up her documents. Herr Müller, wir sollten gehen. Dieser Mann ist eindeutig nicht vertrauenswürdig. Herr Müller, we should leave. This man is clearly not trustworthy. Agreed, Muller said, switching to English. He stood up again, put on his coat. He looked at Mark with undisguised contempt. Mr. Bradley, our business is concluded. I will not sell you my property. Find someone else to deceive. Wait, please. Mark stood up, desperate now. We can work this out. The deal is solid. The numbers are good. I can explain everything. There is nothing to explain, Muller said coldly. You lied to me about your intentions. You lied to your wife. You treat her with contempt while she sits beside you, and you thought she was too stupid to understand. I will not do business with a man of such poor character. He turned to me, his expression softening. Frau Bradley, I wish you the very best. What you have done, learning a language to protect yourself, shows remarkable strength and intelligence. Your husband is a fool to have underestimated you. Thank you, Herr Müller, I said. I'm sorry you traveled all this way for nothing. It was not for nothing, he said. I learned what kind of man Mr. Bradley is before I made the mistake of doing business with him. That knowledge is valuable. He and Frau Schmidt walked out, leaving me alone in the conference room with my husband. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just stared at each other across the conference table, across the wreckage of 12 years of marriage, across a chasm that had grown so wide it could never be bridged again. Mark broke first. Sarah, I can explain. You can't, I said simply. There's no explanation that makes this okay, no excuse that justifies what you've done. The property deal, it's not what you think. The business structure, it just made sense to... Stop lying, I interrupted. I heard you, Mark. I heard everything. You planned to divorce me right after the property sold so I wouldn't get any of the profit. You've been having an affair for at least 7 months, probably longer. You called me stupid, naive, convenient, not particularly smart. So please stop lying. We're past that now. He sat down heavily, his head in his hands. How long have you known? About the affair? Since June? About the property fraud? Since today, though I suspected. And you learned German just to protect myself, just to find out the truth, just to make sure that when you tried to destroy my life, I'd be ready." He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. He was afraid of me, of what I knew, of what I might do next. "Good. What happens now?" he asked quietly. I picked up my purse. "Now? Now I go to my lawyer. I file for divorce. I provide evidence of your affair, your financial fraud, your plan to hide marital assets. I provide recordings of your conversations with Jennifer about how stupid I am, how convenient, how easy to manage, and then I take you for everything you're worth. Sarah, please, don't." I held up my hand. "Don't beg. Don't apologize. Don't try to manipulate me one more time. I'm done, Mark. We're done." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "By the way," I said, "I hope Jennifer is worth it, because after my lawyer is done with you, she's all you'll have left, and something tells me she won't be interested in a broke, unemployed man whose business reputation is destroyed. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she really loves you for who you are. We'll find out, won't we?" I walked out of that conference room, out of that building, out of that chapter of my life, and I never looked back. The 3 months following that meeting were intense. I walked out of that conference room and went straight to Patricia Chen's office, the divorce lawyer Jessica had recommended months ago, the one I'd already consulted with, the one who'd been helping me prepare for this moment. I told her everything, showed her everything. The text messages between Mark and Jennifer, the photos from the private investigator I'd hired showing them together, kissing, entering hotels, looking at engagement rings, the recordings of their conversations about me, about how stupid I was, how naive, how convenient. The evidence of the separate bank account Mark had opened to hide the property profits. The texts between Mark and his lawyer discussing how to structure the deal to avoid sharing profits with me in the divorce. Patricia's eyes gleamed as she reviewed everything. "This is perfect," she said. "Almost too perfect. He's handed you everything you need on a silver platter." "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we destroy him." And we did. In Washington state, we have community property laws. In a standard divorce, each spouse gets 50% of all assets acquired during the marriage. Simple, fair, equal. But Patricia wasn't going for a standard divorce. She filed for what's called unequal division, where the court awards more than 50% to one spouse due to misconduct by the other. In our case, Mark's misconduct was extensive and well documented: adultery, attempted financial fraud, planning to hide marital assets. She also filed for damages, compensation for emotional distress, and financial fraud. Mark hired his own lawyer, a man named Richard Shaw, who had a reputation for protecting wealthy men in divorces, for finding loopholes and technicalities, for making vindictive ex-wives look crazy. He tried every trick in his playbook. He argued that the property deal never closed, so there were no profits to divide. He argued that the separate bank account was for legitimate business purposes, not an attempt to hide assets. He tried to paint my German language learning as obsessive behavior, as stalking, as evidence that I was mentally unstable. He even tried to argue that I had violated Mark's privacy by looking at his phone and emails, that the evidence I'd collected was inadmissible. None of it worked, because I had everything documented, everything time-stamped, everything backed up in multiple locations. Every text message, every photo, every recording, every piece of evidence was authentic, unedited, and damning. The judge assigned to our case was a woman named Elena Ramirez. She was in her early 60s, had been on the bench for 20 years, and had a reputation for being tough but fair. She didn't tolerate nonsense in her courtroom, and she didn't have patience for men who tried to cheat their wives. The first hearing was in October, about a month after the failed meeting with Mueller. Mark showed up in an expensive suit, looking confident. His lawyer, Richard, exuded that particular brand of aggressive competence that some high-priced attorneys have. I showed up in a simple black dress with Patricia beside me and a folder full of evidence. Judge Ramirez reviewed the initial filings from both sides. Then she looked up at Mark over her reading glasses. "Mr. Bradley," she said, her voice neutral but somehow carrying weight, "I've reviewed the allegations made by your wife. They are quite serious. Do you deny having an affair with a woman named Jennifer?" Mark hesitated. His lawyer leaned over to whisper something to him. "No, Your Honor. I don't deny that I had a relationship with another woman during my marriage. And do you deny that you plan to structure a property deal in such a way as to hide assets from your wife in the event of divorce? Another hesitation. More whispering from Richard. The property deal was structured for tax purposes, Your Honor, not to— I didn't ask about tax purposes, Mr. Bradley. I asked if you planned to hide assets from your wife. Mark's face flushed. The deal never closed, Your Honor. So technically— Answer the question, Mr. Bradley. A long pause. Yes, Your Honor. I plan to register the property solely under my business LLC to avoid it being considered marital property. Judge Ramirez made a note. And do you deny referring to your wife as stupid, naive, and convenient in text messages to your mistress? Those messages were taken out of context. Mr. Bradley. Judge Ramirez looked up, her expression stern. Did you or did you not send messages referring to your wife in those terms? Yes, Mark said quietly. I did. Thank you for your honesty. She made another note. Mrs. Bradley, I see you've submitted extensive evidence. Text messages, photographs, recorded conversations. How did you obtain these? Patricia stood up. Your Honor, my client discovered evidence of the affair on her husband's phone, which she had access to via a shared passcode they'd used throughout their marriage. She then documented ongoing communications that involved her financial future. She also hired a private investigator to confirm the affair, which is completely legal. All evidence was obtained lawfully and— I've reviewed the legal brief, Ms. Chen. I'm satisfied that the evidence is admissible. Judge Ramirez looked at me directly. Mrs. Bradley, I understand you learned German specifically to understand what your husband was saying in business meetings. Yes, Your Honor, I said clearly. My husband was conducting business in German, and I suspected he was planning something that would affect me financially. I learned the language over 8 months to protect myself. A small smile flickered across Judge Ramirez's face. That is, impressively thorough. 8 months? Yes, Your Honor, I studied approximately 5 hours per day. Remarkable. She made a note. Mr. Shaw, does your client have any defense against these allegations beyond it didn't technically happen because the deal fell through? Richard stood up, shuffling papers. Your Honor, my client admits to errors in judgment. The affair was wrong, and he regrets it deeply. However, the financial allegations are overblown. The property deal was never completed. No money was ever hidden. My client's wife is claiming damages for something that never actually occurred. Attempted fraud is still fraud, Mr. Shaw. We would argue it was poor planning rather than fraud, Your Honor. Judge Ramirez looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Shaw, your client planned to hide a $250,000 profit from his wife, then file for divorce. He admitted this in text messages to his mistress. In what universe is that poor planning rather than fraud? Richard had no good answer to that. The divorce proceedings took 3 months total, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Patricia had built such an airtight case that Mark's lawyer eventually recommended he settle rather than go to trial. You'll lose, Richard apparently told Mark. Cut your losses. The final settlement. I got 65% of all marital assets. I got full ownership of our apartment. Mark had to pay me $75,000 in damages for emotional distress and attempted financial fraud. Mark had to pay all legal fees, mine and his own. I got a restraining order requiring Mark to stay at least 500 feet away from me. Mark walked away with 35% of assets that he'd spent 12 years building. His business reputation was in tatters. Word had spread through the Seattle real estate community about what he'd tried to do. His business partner, Dave, had quietly distanced himself from Mark's company. Clients had started working with other investors. And Jennifer? Jennifer left him exactly 1 week after the financial details of the divorce became clear. Apparently, when the money dried up, so did her interest. Who knew? Last I heard, Mark was working as a real estate agent at a large firm. Not an owner, not an investor. Just an agent making commission on other people's deals. From running his own business to being someone's employee. Karma, as they say, works in mysterious ways. It's been exactly 1 year since that meeting with Herr Mueller. 1 year since I revealed my secret. 1 year since my marriage ended. I'm sitting on the balcony of my apartment right now, my apartment, not ours. I bought it with the settlement money. It's a beautiful one-bedroom in Capitol Hill with a view of the Space Needle and Elliott Bay. I redecorated everything. New furniture, new paint, new everything. No trace of Mark anywhere. It's mine. Completely, utterly mine. My design business has grown beyond anything I imagined. Turns out, when you're not spending all your emotional energy managing a failing marriage, you have a lot more time and creativity for your work. I've landed major clients. I raised my rates significantly. Last month, I hired a second assistant. I'm making more money now than Mark and I combined ever made during our marriage. I still study German, not obsessively like before, but regularly. I take one lesson per week with Frau Weber just to maintain fluency. We've become friends, actually. She came to visit Seattle last spring, and we spent a wonderful weekend exploring the city, speaking German the whole time. I even went to Munich. Spent 2 weeks there in May, walking the streets, eating schnitzel, drinking beer in beer gardens, using my hard-earned language skills. It was healing somehow, taking back the language that had revealed the truth, making it mine for reasons other than survival. And I met Herr Müller for coffee while I was there. He was delighted to hear from me, even more delighted when I showed up speaking fluent German. We talked for hours about life, about strength, about the importance of standing up for yourself. "You know," he told me in German, "when I first saw you in that conference room, I thought you were just another quiet wife, another woman who'd been made small by a selfish man. But then you spoke, and I realized you were never small. You just let him think you were. That is true power." I think about that a lot, about power, about the difference between being weak and letting someone think you're weak, about strategic vulnerability. People sometimes ask me if I'm bitter, if I hate Mark, if I'm still angry about what he did. The honest answer is, no, I'm not bitter. Bitterness would mean I'm still carrying him with me, still letting him occupy space in my life. And he doesn't. He's irrelevant now. He exists somewhere in Seattle, living his diminished life, and I genuinely feel nothing. Not happiness at his downfall, not satisfaction at his struggles, just nothing. He's a character in a story I used to be part of. That's all. What I feel instead is grateful. Grateful that my instincts told me to pay attention to that feeling of wrongness. Grateful that I trusted myself enough to investigate, to learn, to prepare. Grateful that I had the strength to sit in that conference room and hear the absolute worst things a husband could say about his wife without breaking down. Grateful that I fought back instead of accepting my fate as the stupid, naive, convenient wife he thought I was. Mark thought I was weak. He thought I was naive, gehorsam, liked zu handhaben, naive, obedient, easy to manage. He thought I would never question him, never suspect him, never fight back. He was catastrophically wrong, and that mistake cost him everything. I want to tell you something, if you're still watching this video, if you've stayed with me through this entire story, if you're in a relationship where you feel underestimated, undervalued, invisible, trust that feeling. Your instincts are trying to tell you something important. Don't ignore them. Don't talk yourself out of them. Don't be understanding when you should be questioning. If you suspect betrayal, financial, emotional, any kind, investigate. Protect yourself. Gather evidence. Be smart. Be strategic. Be 10 steps ahead. And if you discover that the person you love has been lying to you, manipulating you, planning to destroy your life, fight back. Don't accept it. Don't forgive too easily. Don't let them make you the victim in their story. You are stronger than you think. You are smarter than they believe. You are capable of more than they imagine. I learned a language in 8 months. I gathered evidence while living with the person I was gathering evidence against. I planned my strategy while pretending everything was fine. I protected myself, and I won. You can too. Whatever you need to learn, whether it's literally a language or figuratively the language of finances, of law, of your own strength, you can learn it. You can become fluent in your own power. As for Mark, if he ever watches this video, and part of me hopes he does, I want him to know something. You thought you were so clever. You thought you had it all figured out. You thought I was too stupid, too naive, too trusting to ever see what you were doing. But here's what you never understood. You lit a fire thinking it would consume me. You pushed me thinking I would break. You underestimated me thinking I would stay small. Instead, you forged me into something stronger than you could ever imagine. You took a trusting, loving wife and turned her into someone who learned to fight. You took someone who believed in partnership and taught her to rely only on herself. You took someone who wanted to grow old with you and showed her she was better off alone. So thank you, actually. Thank you for showing me who you really were before I wasted any more years on you. Thank you for underestimating me so completely that you never saw me coming. Thank you for being exactly the wake-up call I needed. I'm not the same woman I was a year ago. I'm stronger, smarter, happier, wealthier, more confident, more successful, more myself. And you? You're exactly where you deserve to be. As for me, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. I'm living in my beautiful apartment with a view that takes my breath away every morning. I'm running a successful business that I built myself. I'm planning another trip to Germany this fall, maybe Berlin this time, maybe Dresden, maybe just wandering and seeing where I end up. I'm dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'm meeting people who treat me like a person, not a convenience. Men who ask about my day and actually listen to the answer. Men who celebrate my success instead of feeling threatened by it. And I speak German, fließend, fluently. The language that was supposed to be the weapon used against me became my weapon instead. The skill I learned in secret to protect myself became a source of pride, of achievement, of power. Das ist mein Leben jetzt. This is my life now, and this is perfect. And it's perfect. Thank you for watching my story all the way to the end. I know it was long, but I hope it felt worth it. If it resonated with you, if it felt empowering or just satisfying to see justice served, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story. And tell me in the comments, would you have done what I did? Should I have gone further? What would you do if your partner planned to betray you? I want to hear your thoughts and experiences. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that they're stronger than they think. Trust your instincts, protect yourself, fight back when needed, and never let anyone make you feel small. You are enough, you are strong, you are capable. Thank you for being here and supporting the channel. Until next time, stay strong, stay free, stay true to yourself. Auf Wiedersehen.